YAHAWAH, YAHAWAH, Ba'ashim, Yahushai, Rakakadash, Barakatah Yahawah, Barakatah Yahushai. Shalom, it's your brother Obadiah Yahukanan, and we are back again. We want to continue the series on the lives of the prophets. Yahawah has mapped out the directives of the end times. This shows basically where we're going, where we've been, and where we're going. And so we're going to continue on with Prophet Ezekiel, in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to read into that. But of course, before we get started on that, just going to have a few words of commentary because there's so much going on right now in the world and all over the earth. It's quite interesting, but to the point that the level of how do I say this? Ignoring the things that are clearly being established and presented to the inhabitants of the earth. I don't believe anyone who has the ability to track information and happenings of a earthly perspective on as far as everything that's environmental, organic or inorganic in reference to the properties and processes that are functioning on the planet, have taken an opportunity to present to us the differences from a historical position. And quite frankly, I know they won't do it openly and publicly from a biblical perspective, because most people don't believe that everything that we speak about in the Bible is completely historic in its essence and in its factual foundations. And in saying this, I don't see anyone doing any, and I've searched a little bit for this, I don't see anyone presenting any evidence or measurements or documentation in reference to the events that are happening on the planet right now at the level that they are happening. Specifically when we talk about the occurrences that the world supposedly, in most cases, deems them as abnormal occurrences. What I think what I really feel they're ignoring is the fact that the Most High Yahawah, who they ignorantly call God, because that's a title, that's not his name, and it's unfortunate that for them to offer their religious practitioner systems of worship, they seem to be very much intelligent about all types of forms of their doctrines, but they don't seem to be able to understand that the creator of all things specifically gave us a name to call him upon. And when he spoke in that particular linguistic communication that he chose at that time, that was of the ability for us to understand as created beings, he chose a specific language to speak, and he chose a specific way to express his name. Does he not deserve to be called by his name more than anything and anyone and any possible whatever in this universe he created? I mean, wouldn't the ultimate of respect. I mean, most people who are addressed want to be addressed by the name that they answer to and they go by. It doesn't make any sense at all to think that our Creator of all that has ever been created and will ever exist to be created would not want His name to be spoken. Now, I understand that there are some issues in reference to who He says can speak His name. Well, that doesn't rest on His chosen people, the Hebrew Israelites, not at all. And they have no issue or problem with speaking the name if they know it. And of course, there's renditions, of course, that they come up with various in terms of dialect and or pronunciation based on your geographical location and or your I guess your educational and theological upbringing in terms of being able to call Him. But one of the things that we can clearly understand is that titles are not what He should be called. Calling Him God is not who He is. And I really feel He does not appreciate that, nor would YAHAWAH, who they ignorantly call Jesus, which also is another title, that's not His name, would very much like to think that His creation is more intelligent enough to call Him by a name that He has as well. That is very important, especially in this time right now, in this day and age and what's going on. And let me explain why. Because there's a variety of different things that the Most High is doing in terms of trying to garner. He is garnering the attention of those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, and a mindset and spirit to understand. He is making some very serious adjustments and corrections on this planet that He created right now. He is doing it, and He also is showing you absolute biblical comparisons in reference to the things that He is doing. If you can go back and research history, what particular types of resources He affected on the planet when it came to His judgments and His discernments when it came to how He felt His creation was behaving here on the planet He created. And so you can see at this point in time, when I reference biblical occurrences that are happening, the Most High uses His resources in that way to pass His chastisement, His judgments, and His corrections, as well as He could perform His blessings, because He can rain on the just and the unjust when rain is needed, but He can also perform areas that can get more rain than necessary, flooding and things of this nature. But there are some biblical proportionate things that are happening, and no one seems to be who is in the none of the lineage of the culture of the individuals who of course promote and claim supremacy of the earth and the world are even speaking to or addressing the what they call acts of God in terms of their definition or interpretation of things that are happening. They're not doing it. And wouldn't that be something that is very troubling to you in terms of not identifying that? Now that we are seeing things that are happening in this manner, and they have been happening for quite a long time now. I remember growing up, when I was much younger, a child, knowing that there was more to the Most High, who they even call God, His word and His ways, than what I was receiving from the quote-unquote basic traditional religious practices of the worship church systems. I knew there was always more. I always felt in my spirit there was always more. Now that I know that that's the case, and I'm being led in that direction. One of the things that I've always noticed is when the Most High does something, when Yahweh does something, it's always very remarkable because it can't be touched by any understanding. In some cases, always, in most cases, always that we cannot understand why it happened the way it did and the magnitude that it is happening. And so now we're seeing exactly what has been spoken of by YAHAWAH, and no one wants to shine the light of newsworthy commentary on the things that are going on. When YAHAWAH talked about wars and rumors of wars, this is what we're dealing with. He talked about earthquakes in diverse locations, we see it. Just was a 7.7 earthquake that was in the islands that just really shook up a lot of things, and we got a lot of aftershocks that will still be coming. We got volcanoes that are happening and fissures that are popping open and lava flowing in areas that will be unheard of in Hawaii and other areas. We've got the fires that are burning up Australia in major ways. And here's the thing that is very troubling, because in the areas upon which you see these, what they call abnormal occurrences happening, they have a history of very sad effects and things that have happened to the inhabitants of the areas, the original inhabitants of the areas that are being affected by what we see as what they call completely abnormal occurrences. And they are increasing. And when I was young, as I was saying, I didn't see them happening as fast, but now they are extremely speeding up. They're happening so fast. It's absolutely mind-blowing how fast these particular biblical occurrences are starting to happen. You know, hail coming down in an area where the fire was going on in Australia. I mean, you know, you go from that blazing heat to frozen ice balls coming down. I mean, come on. You don't even have to be under a rock to see that this situation is clearly being handled by the Most High, who they ignorantly call God. He is completely on his own time clock now. He stopped the time clock. He doesn't even admonish or even consider the personal humanistic time clock that we try to honor now. That's out. He's not even concerned about that. He has his own hourglass of time. He's turned up. Sands are running down. Sands are just about run out. And that's what the Most High is doing. And we're not paying any kind of homage to that. Either we are just completely blind to the fact that his hand is doing exactly what he decides he wanted to do, or we are just being completely defiant and wanting to believe that what his justifications and his prophecies are happening, and we don't want to agree with it. And see, the thing that's so troubling, that's extremely troubling beyond control, is even if you don't believe that the Most High is doing this, even if you don't believe that the highest power and creator of all living things is passing judgment on the wickedness of this world, of this earth, it doesn't stop the fact that it's happening just because you refuse to believe it, just because you may be listening to information and communication that's being broadcast to you that doesn't depict or speak to or give you definitions of why this could be happening. It does not stop it from happening. And now we're dealing with a potential pandemic, which I believe it's already set in motion, virus situation that's going around the world. And we're downplaying the fact that it's jumping from people to people very quickly. And if you look at the locations upon which it's happening, it has, I believe, a very direct effect on, again, as I said, areas in the world where the inhabitants that are being held captive, and the inhabitants that have been in subjection and have been hidden, were in servitude and in captivity in those areas. And being in captivity and servitude in those areas, they are being freed, and those particular areas and some of the inhabitants that have performed these atrocities to the Most High's chosen people are now starting to feel his recompense, his justice. And there's nothing that anybody can do about it because he's going to do whatever he decides he wants to do. And you know, and this is what we're dealing with now, and it's going to be something that's going to be increasing. That from what we can see from the Most High's, the way He is dictating this whole situation, and I just don't see anything other than repentance that could be the possibility for a repair or close to any kind of repair in this situation. And I'm speaking specifically about repentance of my people, the Hebrew Israelites, the Israelites who may or may not know they are, the ones who are still under the confines of religious practitioner belief systems that have not come out because the Most High did not give us anything of that nature to operate with Him under. So therefore, that would be an error to believe that that's the way to communicate with Him. So we're dealing with a variety of different plagues that have come upon us. Now, you know, just thinking about some of the plagues that the Most High had did before, and of course He says He'll do them again, and now we can see some of it starting to happen a lot. Like the first plague that we had during the time of Egypt was blood. There was a blood plague. And of course we see that to be the case that's continuing at this particular time because it doesn't stop. How do I see that? How do I understand that? Well, the blood of many people is being shed in many ways based on the types of activities that have been happening where you have, and this is no mystery to anyone, you have these unwarranted, crazy, criminal assaults on people where weapons are being used against them, which is just horrible. Shootings and all kinds of different situations that have become a problem. And that first plague is very much a blood plague that is, and it's on our people very heavily, especially the Hebrew Israelites, who they ignorantly call African Americans and black people, which we're not either one because we can't be labeled after two continents, and we certainly aren't addressed and labeled and shouldn't be labeled as a color of a specific color. That's no reality. But that's what they forced. The second plague, which was frogs. Now, frogs to me relates to the fact that we're dealing with a very unclean amphibious reptile. So what does that mean in terms of the plague of the frogs to me, in terms of if I were to interpret that? That means that we have a problem going on where the types of things that we consume and surround ourselves with, as well as what we're supposed to be managing when it comes to that particular species of creation, we have polluted it to the point where they're coming out and they're getting among the inhabitants of the earth that are walking and not in the water all the time, and they're causing various different types of diseases, because this is what happens when you get the frogs and stuff coming out and doing things of that nature. Now, the third plague, of course, was lice or gnats, and to me, it just was following why are the lice going to come out? Well, the lice and the gnats are going to come out because if the frogs come out and the amphibians are dying, it's going to create, gnats, and the lice will come from the gnats, and then we've got the fourth plague, which was flies, and of course you're going to have the flies. We have gnats because the flies are going to come after the dead carcasses. And then, of course, these things will attach themselves to livestock, which means, to me, it's going to affect the way that we produce and how sanitary the process can be in reference to dealing with the different types of foods that we can consume from the livestock breeds that we manage. And then now, of course, boils. Well, that's clearly an effect of environment in terms of the sun, which comes down in ultraviolet rays. And when it does do that, they have been trying to create processes to basically protect their skin from the rays of the sun. Now, from a perspective that we understand as Hebrew Israelites, the sun is very much life to us. it provides vitamin D that is absorbed into our melanin. And when it is absorbed, it becomes life-giving to us and rejuvenation, and immune systems are supported and increased. But for some of the other individuals that do not have the melanin that we have, it's a very detriment. Now, if you are on the planet and the planet is basically sustained by the Most High's blessing from the creation of the sun that He has provided in this universe for us. If the sun is not favorable to you, what does that say about the your occupancy of a location or a planet where the sun is life-giving but is not giving life to an inhabitant of the planet that cannot be in the sun? So that clearly creates a measure of interest that says, why is that? And why would you be alien to a life-giving creation of the Most High that creates life for everything else on the planet? So that's very, very interesting to know that doesn't work. So the boils come upon the skin of individuals that cannot take the elements of the sun and what benefit the sun offers. Now, hail, naturally, we know if you're getting hail in areas that are not most frequent to hail, then that is an anomaly to you that has to be controlled by something greater than what we are and what we can understand. So that in itself becomes a problem. And I remember the eighth one, which was locust. Those locusts, they just jumped on the area of Nevada, Las Vegas, and they had to succumb to the locusts for the most part, because it just virtually shut down Las Vegas in terms of the amount of locusts that came in those areas. Not to mention, locusts end up being very problematic in the countries over in the Afro-Asiatic areas as well. They've been plagued by that quite a few times. So clearly we can see the Most High is passing His hand of correction and judgment in various areas all over the place. And of course, the ninth plague was darkness, and we've seen that several times with the various eclipses that we've had, virtually almost back to back. We've had blood moons, wolf moons. We've had eclipses almost back to back in just in the last 2 years or so, just several. And so that kind of really shows you that we're in dire straits when it comes to obeying and following what the Most High wants us to follow in reference to his orders and His commandments. And then the last one, of course, is the death of the firstborn, and that can be depicted in many ways, but it may not have been activated as of yet, because we are at the doorstep for various different military confrontations that have been escalating, and at some point they probably will, to the Most High and what He says in prophecy, they will kick off and become a factor, not to mention domestically as well as internationally. So which one happens first, that's clearly up to the prerogative of the Most High YAHAWAH, by Shem Yahushua. We cannot determine that. He will, and He'll determine how that goes. And just to go here to do Exodus for a minute, to speak about a few things that happened. This is Exodus chapter 6. I want to read this right there. It says, "Then the Lord Yahweh said unto Moses, Now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand shall I let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of the land." Okay, and so basically the Most High is saying that they're going to have to really just do what He said do, and pay attention and rectify the situation when it comes to the hidden ones, the Hebrew Israelites in the Bible. And if they don't, He's going to force them to make things right with us, and He will set up a standard if they do come against and try to hurt them again. going down a little further in chapter 6, going down to 5, he says, this is what Yahawah the Father is saying, and I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am Yahawah the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and with great judgments. See, this is what he's doing, okay? And I will take you to be to me for a people, and I will be to you a power and God, and ye shall know that I am Yahawah the Lord, your power, your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you in unto the land concerning the which I did swear to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And see, that's specific when he says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's calling out a lineage that speaks down to a specific chosen line. It's not everyone that came from under Abraham, because Abraham had many children, but the Most High specifically calling out a chosen seed. See, he said Abraham to Isaac and to Jacob. He didn't say to any other nation that isn't specifically lined up with Isaac and Jacob. And I will give it to you for a heritage, and I am Yahawah the Lord. Okay? And see, they don't want to adhere to that, because see, if you go over here to chapter 7, it even tells you, on chapter 7, verse 13, says, and Yahawah hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto unto Moses. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuseth to let the people go. And this is where we are, and they don't want to let us go. And they refuse to, because they see us as such a valuable commodity across the board with everything. So they're not going to want to let us go. And they're not going to adhere to trying to let us go. But the Most High is going to force their hand, and they're going to have to do it, because they're not going to have any other choice but to do that. Okay, and then down here, verse 17, it says, thus saith Yahawah the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am Yahawah the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in my hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned into blood. And see, that takes you right back to what I said about the first plague. He is smiting with his hand any and all people who have come against his judgments, his statutes, his commandments, and the things that he is pleased with. And you would think that if we're such intelligent individuals and so smart in this world, why can't we figure out what he does want and what he doesn't want? And so we can't seem to put that together. But let's move on, and let's get with the topic, of course, the lives of the prophets. Yahawah maps these end time directives happening right now, because we want to do that. And we the last we left off with was Jeremiah. Now we're going to Ezekiel. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about Ezekiel, and then we'll read some of the things that Ezekiel had to move forward on in terms of the timeline and different mappings of judgment that went forth through his ministry. So let's deal with that a little bit. So first, okay, now if you want to, this is Ezekiel. We're reading chapter 1, verse 3, but we're going to read about his life, and then we're also going to speak to where he was buried and how he was buried. And that you can reference that through Genesis chapter 10, verse 22, chapter 11, verse 10, and of course, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 17 through 26. But let me read a little bit about my man Ezekiel, the prophet, who to me was he was a very powerful prophet in many ways, and he holds no other prophet that can hold a candle to the things he also had to do, and he was very, very great in the eyes of Yahawah. Okay, Ezekiel, this man was from the land of Ariah. That's Arira, of the priest. And he died in the land of the Chaldeans during captivity after having prophesied many things to those in Judea. The ruler of the people, Israel, killed him there as he was being reproved by him concerning the worship of idols. And they buried him in the field of Maor, M-A-O-U-R, the grave of Shem and Asparad, ancestors of Abraham. Okay? And the tomb is a double cave, for Abraham also made Sarah's tomb in Hebron like it. It is called double because there is a twisting passage and an upper room which is hidden from the ground floor. Now that's in Genesis chapter 23, verse 9. And it is hung over the ground level in a cliff. This prophet gave this prophet gave a portent to the people so that they should pay attention to the river Chebar. When it failed, they should set their hope in the site which the river Chebar donates to the end of the earth. And when it flooded in the return to Jerusalem, for the saint also lived there, and many used to congregate to him. And once, when there was a multitude with him, the Chaldeans were afraid that they would rebel, and came up against them to destroy them. And he made the water stop so that they might escape by getting to the other side. And those of the enemies who dared to pursue were drowned. And see, that's very much similar to what you saw in the Exodus. See, a lot of times we don't understand the Father. He may do something repetitive because in the way of his methodology, his MO, he doesn't change. He may filter through specific things and do them again in a different period of time, but he does get the same message across in terms of his deliverance. Cannot miss that point there. Okay? Through prayer, he finished, Shalaki. Through prayer, he furnished them of his own accord with an abundant supply of fish, and for many who were at the point of dying, he entreated that life should come from YAHAWAH, from God. Okay? When the people was being destroyed by its enemies, he went to the enemy leaders and terrified by the prodigies, they ceased. He used to say this to them: are we lost? Question. Has our hope perished? Question. And in the wonder of the dead bones, he persuaded them that there is hope for Israel, both here and in the coming age. So he was definitely giving you a roadmap to tell you that there is a possibility that things will go forward, and they were. You know, that's why I like when he says one part of the roadmap. Okay, when you talk about a map, right? He says, "Are we lost?" Here's one thing. He says again, "Has our hope perished?" Okay, see, he's saying these things, and they have what I call a map incentive message. It's actually giving you a direction by a format of saying this is where we could are going. Are we lost? Question. Most people, when they deal with some sort of map or some sort of directive, they want to know if they're lost or not. This is one of the major things that you have in question when it comes to what you see daily. Are we lost? Are we going to acquire salvation? Are we going in the right direction for salvation? Who has the truth? Who has the right answers? You know, He says here, has our hope perished? No. Do we have no hope? A lot of time, not only just the Hebrew Israelites that are being awakened, but several of the other nations who come upon the Akim on the highways and byways, they ask them many times, has our hope perished? In other words, are we not going to be able to be saved, or are we completely lost? And of course, in the wonder of the dead bones, he persuaded them that there is hope. And that's extremely important, because the dead bones are our people who are waking up, and for Israel here and then of course in the age to come. While he was there, he used to show the people, Israel, what was happening in Jerusalem and in the temple. He was snatched up from there, and he went to Jerusalem to rebuke those who were faithless, like Moses. This man saw the pattern of the temple with its wall and broad outer wall, just as Daniel also said that it would be built. He pronounced judgment in Babylon on the tribe of Dan and that of Gad, because they were committing sacrilege against Yahawah the Lord by persecuting those who were keeping the law and respecting them. He worked this great wonder that snakes would devour their infants and all their flocks. And he foretold that on their account, the people would not return to its land, but would be in Media until the communication of their era. Talking about the Midianites and the Persians and what King Cyrus had until they were brought back to Israel to start to, in Jerusalem, to start rebuilding the temple. And the one who killed him was one of them, for they opposed him all the days of his life. So you can see in most cases, this is the same thing we get at this time. We get opposed in every phase of our lives, all the time. There's not one time when we get any rest. It is continuous upon us all these times, and it's similar to what happened. This is the map that Ezekiel is showing in reference to what is happening and what has been happening to his people as far as the Most High is concerned. And so let's look a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the notes I have on the timeline about him and his prophecies and what he was bringing forth that people needed to pay attention to, because there's still a lot to speak about in terms of what Ezekiel did. Okay. Now, for the most part, what we're dealing with is the book Ezekiel, the glory of the Lord. You will know that I am the Lord. That's his name. Okay. Ezekiel. Okay. The prophecy of judgment, the Lord is there or not there. Say first you got the fate of Judah before the siege, and then you've got foes of Judah during the siege. Now the fate of Judah during the siege was from 593 to 588 BC, and then of course the foes of Judah happened during 587 through 586. Now the prophecies of restoration that Yahawah the Lord is there, the future of Judah, it was after the siege, which came in around 586 to 571. Now, from chapters 1 through 3, Ezekiel sees the glory and receives his call. Now, that was during the 7-year of prophesying horror and no hope. This was that window at that point in time, where you also had chapters 4 through 24, where the judgments against Judah were portrayed by, and Ezekiel was expressing that to what was happening to the northern, southern tribe and the king tribe. And then, of course, chapters 25 and of course 32, you had the judgments against the gloating nations. And so you can see the Yahawah spreading this out in terms of how this operates. And then you have the 15 years of prophesying hope that came into play, and that was chapters 33 through 39. And then that's the restoration of Israel to Yahawah, to the Lord. And then, of course, chapter 40 through 48, you have the visions of the temple. Okay, So you know there was a break point in Ezekiel's 25 marks at the end of Ezekiel's prophecies of doom and gloom for Judah. You know, at that point it occurs just after the final stage of Jerusalem, where it begins with Ezekiel chapter 24 and verse 2 starts to talk about, you know, the bold red vertical lines of correspondence between Jerusalem's fall and Babylon. And then you have Ezekiel chapter 33 through 21, and that's in the 12th year of the exile, on the 5th of the 10th month. And of course, the refugees from Jerusalem came to Ezekiel, saying the city has been taken. But see, he already prophesied that it would be taken, so they're just basically saying something now and agreeing with what he had already prophesied to him from YAHAWAH by Shem Shah. Okay, so if we were to recap just a little bit, 593 BC, Ezekiel's prophecy to at Chebar. Remember this? We're talking about the river. I mean, the lake of Chebar in that area. And that's Ezekiel 1. And of course, 593 BC, Ezekiel's calling and instruction from the Most High, and that's Ezekiel 2. 593 BC, Ezekiel eats the scroll. Remember, we got to remember that scroll he had to eat. It went in sweet, but it was in his stomach bitter once he digested it, because that's just saying that, you know, you may think you got prophets who speak saying peace, 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 but there is no peace. But then when you take it in sweet, but then when you come to find out that what you're taking in now is very bitter, and now it's coming against you in reference to the truth of Yahweh's word. Okay, then you also have 593 BC. All these are the 593 BC areas through chapter 4 through 5, where Ezekiel foretells the siege of Jerusalem. And then, of course, 593 BC, where Ezekiel's vision of the end, and that's for chapter 6 through 7. And then 592 BC, Ezekiel's first temple vision comes up, and that's chapters 8 through 19. 591 is Ezekiel sees Yahawah refuses the elders, and that's chapter 20. And then 591 BC, Ezekiel prophesies against Jerusalem, and that's, of course, chapter 21 through 22. And 591 BC, Ezekiel prophesies against two sisters. Now that's important to understand that part there in Ezekiel chapter 23. Now what I want to do real fast is, because I know that'll throw you, so let's go to Ezekiel chapter 23 real quick here. Two sisters. We're going to deal with that in a minute here. I'll get here. Yeah. Shalaki. Bear with me. Something else I'm going to read in Ezekiel 2, I think it's 23. So bear with me now, okay? Alright, what's mine? There we go. Alright. Check this out. The word of Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Son of man, there were two women, the daughters of one mother, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. They were their breast pressed, and there they bruised the teats of their virginity. And the names of them were Aloah, the elder, and Abatha, her sister. And they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names: Samaria and Aloah, and Jerusalem, Alabiah. And Alabiah played the harlot when she was mine, and she noted on her lovers, on the Assyrians, her neighbors, which were clothed with blue captains and rulers, all them desirable young men, horsemen riding upon horses. Thus she committed her whoredoms with them, with all of them that were the chosen men of Assyria, and with all on whom she doted. With all their idols she defiled herself. Neither left she her whoredoms brought from Egypt, for in her youth they lay with her, and they bruised the breast of her virginity, and poured their whoredoms upon her. Wherefore I have delivered her into the hand of her lovers, into the hand of the Assyrians, upon whom she doted. These devoured her nakedness. They took her sons and her daughters and slew her with the sword. And she became famous among women, for they had executed judgment upon her. And when her sister Abaliah saw this, she was more corrupt in her inordinate love than she, and in her whoredoms none than her sister in her whoredoms. She denoted upon the Assyrians, her neighbors, captains, and rulers, and clothed most gorgeously horsemen riding upon horses, all of them desirable young men. Okay. Then I saw she was defiled, and they took both one way, and that she increased her whoredoms. For when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vellum, girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon the heads, all of them princes, to look to after the manner of the Babylonians and Chaldeans in the land of their nativity. And as soon as she saw them with her eyes, she doted upon them, and sent messengers unto them into Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her into her bed of love, and they defiled her with her whoredoms, and she was polluted with them, and her mind was alienated from them. So she devoured the whoredoms and discovered her nakedness. Then my mind was alienated from her, like as my mind was alienated from her sister. Yet she multiplied her whoredoms in calling to remembrance the days of her youth, wherein she had played the harlot in the land of Egypt. For she doted upon the paramours whose flesh is as the flesh of asses, and whose issue is like the issue of horses. Thus calling to remembrance the lewdness of her youth, bruising thy teats by the Egyptians for the paps of thy youth. Therefore, Alabiah, thus saith Yahawah, God, behold, I will raise up thy lovers against thee, from whom thy mind is alienated, and I will bring them against thee on every side. And see, so basically, this is the same thing that depicts what's happening and what has happened with not only our people, but the map shows of what happened historically through time. As far as these two sisters were concerned, one of the sisters that you could show in present time right now is of course you had Britain, you have the area of Europe, and then of course you have the area of the Americas. Both of them have the depiction and the similitude of being sisters. The U.S. pretty much is a sister, a young daughter or sister of Great Britain in terms of in the European areas, where in terms of the things that they've done. And have they committed whoredoms against the Most High? Well, absolutely, in so many different ways, in terms of going against His laws, statutes, and commandments, and laying down. And it says that in Revelation that all the nations have drunk of the wine of her fornication. So this is what we see depicted right here in this particular description that we see. And so that certainly speaks to that. Now, okay, moving past the two sisters, next is in 588 BC, we have a siege of Jerusalem begins, and that's Ezekiel chapter 24. 587 BC, Yahweh's revenge on Ammon and Edom and that's Ezekiel 25. That's absolutely a beautiful one right there. 586 BC, Ezekiel pronounces judgment to Tyre, and that's chapter 26 to 28. And then Ezekiel prophesies against Egypt in 586 BC, and that's Ezekiel 29:32. And then Ezekiel the watchman, this was part that I thought was very interesting, 586 BC, and that's Ezekiel chapter 33. And Ezekiel explains Jerusalem's fall in Ezekiel chapter 33:21. Ezekiel foresees reproof and restoration. Now we start coming into the time when the fathers start to reprove. This I love because the way this is set up as far as this timeline is a map. It's a biblical map. It shows you the things that are going to happen, the things that are happening right now in this world. So it's very, very unique in terms of how all these chapters go as far as mapping it out. Ezekiel 5:85, Ezekiel sees restoration of the dry bones. Chapter 37, that's very, very popular. And of course, 585, Ezekiel sees future battle. Ezekiel 38, and that's 585. And then 585, Ezekiel sees Yahweh's judgment upon Gog. And then 573 BC, Ezekiel's second temple vision happens, and that's Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48. So now we're getting real close to, we have to close out soon because we're getting long in the tooth here. So I'm just going to read a few things that I think are important, and then we're going to close it out. Okay, in 722 BC, the northern kingdom was taken into captivity by the Assyrians. Okay, and that's of course 2 Kings 17 through 1, chapter 17 through 1, especially 2 Kings 17:5 through 6. Although I alluded to the fact that the 10 tribes lost as one of the astute Bereans reminding us that they are not in fact lost, and that this idea can lead to some faulty theological conclusions. As far as Bible knowledge is concerned, Paul's reference to the 12 tribes of Israel shows the era of the British Islam, saying here, which simply states, hold that the Anglo-Saxon peoples, especially England and the U.S., are descendants from the 10 tribes, and therefore inherit the promises addressed in Scripture, especially in Israel. This is not scriptural, and we will probably briefly touch some of this in the next couple of lessons in these points. So we got to understand, they try to say that Britain and England and U.S. were described as the 10 northern tribes. That's not true, and this is people who have an agenda to push a specific narrative, come up with that interpretation, but that's not the case at all. The 12 tribes were scattered around the world, not just to England and the United States. So that's out. Okay, in 622 BC, the Book of the Law, founded by Josiah. And then, of course, I want to read a little bit of that. In 622 BC, 2 Kings 22 3 and 2 Kings 22:1 describes the incredible events during the reign of Josiah, the godly king over the southern kingdom of Judah at the time that the book of the law was found in the house of Yahawah, where it had been lost. 2 Kings 22:8. King Josiah wept when he heard the word of Yahawah, for he saw the awfulness of Judah's sin and knew that Yahawah's wrath burned against them. That's Josiah sought to bring about national revival, but it was not to last. And the prophetess Huladah, 2 Kings 22:14, 15, 16, and 17, told him that after his death, Yahawah would bring judgment upon Judah, for they had forsaken Yahawah and burned incense to other gods. Okay, Yahawah's wrath on Judah began when King Josiah was killed on the plain of Megiddo, trying to stop Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, on his way to Karamish on the Euphrates. All right. Note that the rapid events cascaded downward, doomed for Judah in the following after in 605 BC, Jeremiah chapter 46 verse 2, Pharaoh Necho was defeated by Cheramish by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And of course, then we talk about in 605 BC, the first siege of Jerusalem by Babylon, and then how in 605 Ezekiel was 18 years old when 15-year-old Daniel and his 3 friends were captured by Nebuchadnezzar and taken from Babylon. And Daniel's prophetic ministry from the Babylonians begins at 605 BC. And Ezekiel was left behind in Jerusalem. At the age of 30, he would be eligible for the priesthood, but before he reached that age, he was taken into exile in the next invasion. So that's basically what happened to Ezekiel at that particular time. And then, of course, the last portion of this is several years things were relatively quiet in Jerusalem and Judea. The false prophets were bringing good news of peace. That's Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 14. And the people loved it, of course. They fell for all of that, like they do today. Jeremiah 5:31, and continued in their sin. That's what the people continue in their sin right now. Okay? Only one lonely voice disturbed the peace, and the voice of Jeremiah prophesied in Judah. And he had to, because Ezekiel was already captured at that point in time. And then, of course, the siege of Jerusalem and the exile to Babylon. We're dealing with when Jehoiakim died, and Jehoiakim succeeded him as king of Judah in 598. And then Nebuchadnezzar, who with his defeat of Necho, had become a dominant world power, besieged Jerusalem for the second time, and taking King Jehoiakim into exile Babylon. And of course, that was in 597 BC. And then, of course, the 5th year of Jehoiakim's exile, specifically given in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 2, along with the 10,000 Jews, one whom was a very young man named Ezekiel. So as you can see, that pretty much was a timeline in reference to what was happening with Ezekiel. And what I want to do is just show you a quick picture of a map, and then I'm going to close this out. And I pull this map up. I don't know if it comes in clear for you or not. Hopefully it will. See that? You see that map? That's the timeline map that I got for Ezekiel. I don't know if you got all that in there or not. Try to get it to you all of it anyway. See? Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure you had that information of the notes that I pulled. All right. So, all right. So for the most part, that was roadmap with Ezekiel and how he shows his particular part of the judgment, as well as the deliverance of Israel, and where it's going to go to this point in time. So now we're in the same situation that we're dealing with as far as Ezekiel is concerned. We have a variety of different things that are happening, and the judgment is coming down on Israel as well as the rest of the earth and the world. And the Most High has a plan, and he's enacting the plan, and all we really need to do at this point is get to a point where we need to go back to the law, statutes, and commandments and try to follow them the best we can, because we know that we're still in captivity. But at the same time, the major important thing is we have to keep our eye on and keep faith in YAHAWAH, who they only call Jesus. He is the one who we have to follow, and we have to do our best to make sure that we understand that without faith in YAHAWAH, you have no ability to be able to stick to the commandments as best as possible. It would just be utterly impossible for you to be able to do it. And that's why the faith in YAHAWAH is so important. So that's why that grace without faith just doesn't work. And so we have to do that. Faith in YAHAWAH and trying to follow what the Father gave us as far as his ordinances are concerned. This is what we need to do, in order to be back in good standing with the Most High, and wait upon His deliverance, because it is coming, and you can see it with all the things that He's doing here and on the earth. And with that, I hope that this part of the lesson was edifying, and I look forward to going into more teachings and giving you more information as we continue to talk about the lives of the prophets and how Yahawah has mapped these directives towards the end time that's happening right now. And that, we'll say shalom until next time.